Who was number one? You guys in the back. What is carrying capacity? So I'm going to get a little bit picky. So it's maximum number of organisms, yes. You said the maximum number of organisms an environment can hold. Right now, I have 15 and, what is this, 12. I have 27 chairs in my classroom. How many students can I have in my classroom? 27. Perfect. What decided how many students I can have?
Chairs.
Number of chairs. So that's my limiting factor. Easy. By your definition, so my carrying capacity is 27. By your definition, with the maximum number of organisms the environment can hold, then I bet you I could fit almost 100 people in this room. I bet you I could. You think so? I mean, if you have people sitting in the chairs, standing on the tables, and just like stacked up, like right next to each other, would that exceed our carrying capacity? It would. So, what's a better way to say it's not how much the environment can hold, because can support. Perfect. So it's the maximum number of organisms the environment can support without degradation, because we don't want to break down the environment. We want to make sure that it is available to future generations. Great job. All right, number two. Who's number two? Perfect. What type of population graph shows unlimited resources and no natural predators? It's what? J-shaped curve. What's another way we can say it?
Exponential.
Perfect. Exponential growth. Do populations in nature usually exhibit exponential growth? No. What type of populations would you expect to exhibit exponential growth?
Bugs.
Not necessarily bugs.
Like ice.
I gave you two cases when exponential growth is expected. Invasive species, because they have no natural predators, right? They didn't belong here. They have nothing that's looking for them. And then, therefore, their population can increase and they can outcompete our native species. And what was the other one? After a natural disaster. Perfect, because the population is so low, below usually carrying capacity, that those who are there are going to be able to have essentially unlimited resources until the population grows. Good job. Who's number three? All right. What type of graph shows a population where there are limited resources?
I know it's a boom and bust cycle.
No, it's
Logistic growth.
It's logistic growth. It usually looks like a boom and bust cycle, so logistic growth, and we call that an S-shaped curve. Because we know that when you have that logistic growth, it looks like this really, but you'll always see it drawn like this. What do we call that area where it flattens out? What would that be? That would be your carrying capacity. So I'm going to write K. So here, this would be like a more exact, it would be like here. Remember, carrying capacity is going to be indicated by the lowercase k. Good job. You guys are 4. What are limiting factors? So factors that determine the maximum number of organisms in your population. All right. What are density dependent factors? What can you tell me about density dependent?
Impacted by the size of population.
Well, it's the fact whose impacts increase as population size increases. Usually biotic. So if you're given a list of limiting factors, again, not just in this class, you're going to take biology. You have to pass the EOC. This is on the biology EOC. We go over it now because it's usually the last unit you cover in biology with one of your first check-ins. And so if you can see something said the limiting factor is food. It's like, well, food is living things are biotic. Density dependent. Because the more people or more individuals in your population, then the less food you're going to have available. So you're going to feel that impact based on population size. All right, what about density independent?
Impacted by population regardless of size, usually abiotic.
So the impact, it's not dependent upon the population size. And so these are usually abiotic, but these are usually things like weather disasters, right? It doesn't matter if we have 25 people in this room or we have 125. If a tornado is coming, the tornado is coming. Yes?
Would pollution also come?
Well, would pollution be density dependent or density independent?
I'd say independent, but it's caused by something that is.
Right. So it would be both. So the impacts would be both, because on us would be density dependent. More people we have, more popular or pollution. If you're an animal, if the water's polluted, it's polluted.
Right.
Yes. All right. Great job. Number 5. What's a population? Who is that? You guys. What's a population? What's population? No. What's the definition for population? Go ahead. Same species, same place, same time. How about, what's a species? That's you guys over here.
Isn't it like they're able to reproduce the,
Okay.
I forgot the word, but it's like when.
The babies can have babies.
Yeah.
This is the only definition I will accept. A species is a group of organisms so closely related they can reproduce and produce fertile offspring. And you told me that that means that their babies can have babies. What's the goal of every living thing? Survive and reproduce. So all living things want to do two things. It's called their fitness. You have to be able to survive and you need to reproduce. But you don't need to it's not just you reproducing, your offspring have to reproduce as well. It's all about carrying on genetic lineage. And you don't think about it like that, but that's what allows species to continue on. So in this classroom, I would argue that I am the most fit. That doesn't mean I can outrun you in a race. It doesn't mean I can bench press more than you, although for some I'm pretty sure I can. Little shade. There we go. Not you, just in general, throwing it out to the room, right? Because I've survived the longest. I'm at least 29 years old, okay? That's when we stop counting, okay? And then I have 5 kids. Does anybody in here have more than 5 kids? I win. I win, okay? And one of mine has had a baby. I win. I do. No, trust me. They've given me all this metal on my wrist. All right, so remember, when you think about things, we need to think in terms of being able to survive and reproduce. Reproducing is so important for living things that they employ 2 different strategies. And we went over this 4th period, but you guys missed it. And so there are 2 different strategies that organisms can subscribe to make sure that they are able to survive and reproduce. And they can either be what we call R-selected, I'll put right there, or K-selected. R-selected species, these tend to have a small body size. They tend to have short lifespans. They give little to no parental care. They have a short gestation. So Small body size, short lifespan. They don't give any parental care. They just have babies and leave. And a very short gestation. What's gestation mean?
Like how long it takes to make the baby.
How long it takes, the baby's cooked for how long, right? Very good. So what is human gestation? We say it's 10 lunar months is what they go by. It's 280 days. So we always say 9 months, but by the time you find out that you're pregnant, they count it like from their last menstrual cycle. So it's just 1 month. So our gestation would be 10 lunar months. These are organisms, they have lots of baby, so lots of offspring, and hope some survive. How many of you have seen Finding Nemo? Do you remember at the beginning of Finding Nemo? Usually I just fast forward through it. But at the beginning, because it's just the beginning. It's kind of like the Up. I don't like to watch the beginning of Up either. It makes me sad. But in Finding Nemo at the beginning, they've got all their eggs. And there's like hundreds of them, right? And then it's like Marlin and his little wife fish. And they're sitting there deciding like, oh, we're going to name this half Marlin Jr. And then this half we can name Nemo, right? And then what happens?
They all die.
The shark comes and they get eaten. And how many survived? One. That's an R-selected species. They have a whole bunch of babies and hope that some survive. They're using the law of probability. Not all of them can die, right? So an example, so we can say things like fish. Another example would be insects. A mayfly lives as an adult for 1 day. So as soon as they're there, their whole goal is to go ahead and reproduce because they know at the end of the day, they're not going to be here anymore, right? So they have a lot of eggs and hope that those eggs survive. So we have fish, we have insects, so things that are relatively small. What about a plant? Can you think of a plant that has like a whole bunch of babies? What would a plant's baby be? A seed, perfect. Can you think of a plant that has a whole bunch of seeds? That's perfect. Dandelions. What's the dandelion? What's a dandelion's baby? Or their seeds? The little white things, the little wishes, right? And you pick them up out of the yard and go like that, and out goes all of those weeds going into your neighbor's yard, right? So dandelions also employ it. K-selected is the opposite. So if R-selected has a small body size, your K-selected, they tend to be larger. They have a longer lifespan. They give parental care. So instead of spending their energy on just making a whole bunch of babies, they make like a few babies. So they have few offspring. And instead of putting that energy into making a whole bunch of them, we make one and we spend the time to make sure that it lives long enough. They have a longer gestation. So some examples, definitely humans. We already said our gestation's about 10 lunar months. You got another one? Perfect. Elephants. Do you know what the gestation for an elephant is?
It's a year.
It's longer than a year. 22 months for one breed of elephant. 22 months. Think about the idea of parental care. Remember, we need to survive and reproduce, but we need our offspring to be able to reproduce. So in order to ensure that happens, we provide parental care. Birds, yeah, absolutely. You could say birds. Does anybody know of a plant, since we did one plant example in the other one? Coconuts. Coconuts. They have very few coconuts on a coconut tree, and it takes a long time for them to grow, and they're very, very protected. And so the tree provides it with all the nutrients it needs for that to be able to go on. Think about it like this. Way, way back in the day, girls would be married off like in colonial times. We're looking at like 15. By 18, you're an old maid, right? So you live with your parents, they got you to 15 and they moved on. So you didn't have to finish going to school, you didn't have to do any of that stuff. Now, when do you go off of your parents' insurance? Does anybody know?
Like 18.
You wish. It used to be 18, 24. Your parents can keep you covered until they're 24. Why? Because what happens, or what's the goal when you're in your 20s? that you have a job, that you can provide for yourself now. So now the parental care is no longer needed, or it's needed on a different level. So these are the two different reproductive strategies that organisms can employ to make sure that they are getting that they're giving their genes the best chance to carry on. All right, thank you. Number 6, do you know the levels of organization from smallest to largest? Oh, yep, so atoms, molecules make up, perfect, organelles, cells, tissue. I'm going to go this way. Organs. What comes after organ? I'm sorry? It's not organism. Organ system. Remember, so you have, your heart is an organ, but your heart in conjunction with the vasculature make up the cardiovascular body system. And then what happens? Organism. And then what happens?
Species,
Then what happens?
population, community, ecosystem, biome and biosphere.
Perfect. All right, so we have to finish going over our notes from yesterday. But before we do, because you're going to do a POGL afterward, right? So remember, the POGL is when you guys work in pairs and you kind of talk about these things. But when you do your POGL, I want to make sure that you have some vocab terms. One of them is natality. What does natality mean? What is natal? Have you ever heard like natal?
Like prenatal.
Prenatal. When do you have prenatal? When do you take?
When you're pregnant.
Is prenatal is like is before
The baby comes.
before the baby comes. What about a neonatal intensive care? What would that be?
Something for a baby's year.
Neo is new. Natal means baby. So, or birth. So natality is the fancy word for giving birth.
Yeah, it's
What would then mortality be?
die.
Perfect. Death. So birth is natality, death is mortality. What do we call it when organisms or individuals move through or keep moving around in a given area?
Pacing.
Like birds do it usually in the, what? Migration. So migration is movement around or through a geographic area. What do we call it when organisms move into an area? That's immigration. This is when organisms move in. Does anybody know what it's called when you move out? Emigration. Very good. It's E with one M, I think. Now I don't feel so confident. This is when organisms leave. So when you came into class today, well, you're migrating throughout the school. You immigrated into my classroom. You're going to sit here for a minute, and then you'll emigrate out of my room to immigrate to your next room, but migrate between classes. Okay? So those are just terms. Some of them I think you know. Some of them I want to make sure that we've reviewed, okay? You'll need those for your POGL.